And joining us now, without any further ado or delay, Congressman, 3rd District Democrat, my Congressman, Bobby Scott. Congressman Scott, great to have you with us.
Good to be with you, John. How are you?
Lots to talk about, little time. Congressman, haven't had you on enough. That's my bad. Every time I reach out to your staff, they get you on, but that's been my bad. So I'm sorry about that. Hey, I want to give a shout-out, though, to your press secretary, Austin. He's doing a great job. He's a fine young man.
Thank you. He's a Christopher Newport grad.
Excellent. CNU captains, go CNU. Let's get to some of the things that affect your committee. Bobby Scott is the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee in Congress. So let's get to some of that stuff. Then we're going to get to New Zealand and a couple other issues out there. Things you've marked up, $15 minimum wage. You've marked that up. Where does that stand?
Well, it's been marked up. We are expecting a floor vote sometime in the next couple of weeks. We've got a lot of work on the floor, so I think it's scheduled for. There's no specific date now, but certainly within a couple of months. But the minimum wage hasn't gone up. If we get to this summer without increasing the minimum wage, which it looks like we're going to do because the House has to act, then the Senate has to act, then it would have to be signed by the President. It would be the longest period of time without an increase in the minimum wage since the minimum wage started in the 1930s. So it's about time that we did something. We had a good committee vote, and the committee. You mentioned the committee to begin with. It's got a lot of jurisdiction: minimum wage, overtime, the Fair Labor Standards Act. You've got joining a union, whether it's easier or harder. Workplace safety, like mine safety and OSHA. A lot of things on the labor side, on the education side, early childhood education. K through 12, higher education, including vocational education, and then things in the middle like healthcare, Older Americans Act, child nutrition, and juvenile justice is in the Education and Labor Committee. In the Senate, it's in the Judiciary Committee, which gives you a kind of an idea of what the House and the Senate think the problem is with juvenile justice. In the House, we think they don't have enough education. In the Senate, apparently they don't think they have enough jail time. So that's an interesting fact that Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act is in Education and Labor in the House, and in the Senate it's in the Judiciary Committee. But we've got a lot of work in the committee, and the minimum wage is just one.
Why not go for $10? I mean, I agree with you that the minimum wage should go up, but right now it's what, $7.75? And
$7.25, huh?
$7.25. So you want to over double it. The president's not going to sign that. So again, this is politics jumping up and down. If you were serious about raising the minimum wage, why not make it $10? That would be, I mean, $10 would be a very tough argument for somebody to veto, or for the Republicans to vote the other way. $15 is like, okay, the jump is too big, and so the argument becomes perverted over people losing jobs, etc. Where $10, it would be like, okay, are you sure we can't pay somebody $10 an hour? Like, who would even hire somebody if you're under that? Why wouldn't you just go for $10?
Well, you're right. If we tried to raise the minimum wage $15 an hour tomorrow afternoon, it would be very disruptive. But it's gradual. It's over 5 years. By 2024, you get to $15. And interestingly, the steps we take, the first couple of steps, are exactly the same as what passed, or just about the same as what passed in Arkansas and Missouri last November. Mm-hmm. So if we just took that first couple of years of the $15 by 2024, we would have what got by a overwhelming vote, over 60% in both states, passed the increase in the minimum wage. So I'm not. $15 an hour I think is reasonable. If somebody thinks a more reasonable number, there was no, when it came up in the committee, there's no amendment to say, well, let's do 10 or let's do 12 or let's do 11 like 11 or 12 like they did in Arkansas and Missouri. Nothing. So it won't get to the president unless it gets through the Senate. You'll undoubtedly need 60 votes in the Senate to pass it. And so if it passes the House and the Senate, it will probably be something that the president can sign. But if we pass 15 in the House and the Senate passes another number, we'll get together, and I'm sure we would come to some compromise of something that the House and the Senate can agree on. But there has been no counteroffer. It's just been, shall we raise the minimum wage to 15? And the answer is no. It doesn't say, well, let's raise. You've offered a reasonable alternative. Let's raise a significant raise, but not to 15.
Well, that's because I'm reasonable, and so I look at the $15 thing, and a lot of it is politics, and it's not a real number because it isn't going to pass. I would rather we get a real number, and I think we agree on that. Let's get to paycheck fairness, which is basically another bill you've marked up, which is being sure that women and men are paid the equal for equal work. In principle, like, who's not in favor of that, right? Everybody's in favor of that. In reality, Congressman, as a business owner myself, I don't know what that means, because does that mean if I've got two people doing the same job and I give somebody a 5 rating and they get a 6% annual increase, and that's a male, and I give the female a 3 rating and they get a 3% increase and that's a female, am I now at risk of violating federal law based on a performance evaluation? That's what the problem is when you get into things like that. How do you deal with that?
But the reality is that the women are getting 5s and the men are getting 3s, and the men are being paid more than the women for the same work. That was Lily Ledbetter's problem. She was doing better than most of the men, and she was being paid significantly less. All the paycheck fairness does not change the substantive law that you can't discriminate against women. That's already the law. Essentially, what it did was to conform the process to for filing discrimination cases, conform them to what you can get in other cases. There were caps and procedural hurdles in pursuing a gender discrimination case that did not exist if you're filing for age or race or something else, and so it made it more fair.
All right, but again, you pass this, and I guess they're going to certainly.
Now remember, it's already illegal to discriminate against women.
Right. That's what I mean. That's why I don't see where you need this law, and all it does is put pressure on small business owners like myself, and I just talk from reality, because you've now got another layer of regulations you've got to look at, and I don't even know how sure that how you could enforce it.
Well, you have that whatever problem that causes you have today. It is illegal to discriminate in the workplace against women.
Right.
The Paycheck Fairness Act conformed the process for filing discrimination cases to the same process that you have for others. For example, there was a cap on damages. There's no cap on damages for if you're suing for race or religion or something like that. You don't have those same caps, and it just conformed the gender discrimination laws to the others. What the problems you're talking about exists whether we pass the bill or not.
I just don't see where you need it. I guess you want to get to conformity, but it's just another layer. And when you have a full employment environment, Congressman Scott, like we do now, I mean, again, as a business owner, I'm looking for the best people to do the best job. And so female, male, I mean, it doesn't matter. And I bet you could talk to 1,000 business owners in your district. None of them would say that their income scale has anything to do with gender. It's like you can either do the job or you don't, and you're either worth the salary.
That sounds good in theory, but the fact is that there is widespread discrimination, and they found that the GAO did a study of the high-tech industry in Silicon Valley and found widespread discrimination against women and minorities, that there was a hostile work environment, that women and minorities were quitting at alarming rates. They weren't being hired. And they found one example that a company, when they took the indicators of race off of somebody's resume and just did it by the qualifications, they found that the callback for interview rate went from 20% to 60%. Just by eliminating indications, you could either a name, racially indicated name, or college they went to. When they took those indicators out and just went with the qualifications, people started getting interviews. I mean, this is the indication is widespread, and it's why orchestras now, when they do auditions, you're behind a screen, so they can't see who's playing. All they can hear is the music, because they were finding that women and minorities weren't getting picked because they look at them and they just hear different music. If you're just listening to the music, it's fair, and all we're trying to do is make it fair. Women are consistently in America paid for the same work less than men.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with 3rd District Democratic Congressman Bobby Scott. He's the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee in the House of Representatives. Congressman, you've spent a lot of time on workforce development in the rebuilding the Education Act. Have you spent any time working with Ivanka Trump on her workforce development initiatives, and is there any synergy there?
John, I'm going to surprise you. I met with Ivanka Trump in my office talking about many different issues, including workforce development, early childhood education, child care, family and medical leave, that she is much more progressive than her father is on those issues, and I think there's a lot of common ground. In terms of the Rebuild America Schools Act, is a significant investment in schools. The elementary school that I went to over 60 years ago, is still there. And it was renovated a few years ago, but they have estimated that about $200 billion there's $200 billion in present infrastructure needs for public schools today. This bill would cover about half of that if it passes as it is. Hopefully, frankly, it would be part of the overall infrastructure bill. If we have $1 trillion infrastructure bill, we'd allocate a little chunk of that for school construction. It will improve education and, interestingly enough, create many more jobs for $0.1 trillion in expenditure than the $1.5 trillion tax cut will do. Many more jobs for 1/15 the cost.
So, in your meeting with Ivanka Trump, did you hit it off with her? Do you have common ground to work on? Do you see a relationship there going forward where you can actually get some things done?
Yes. There are a number of issues. She wrote a tweet after we passed the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act reauthorization. She sent out a tweet very much in favor of that legislation. It was signed by the president a few weeks later. So there are a lot of things that we agree on that, and the implementation of many of the provisions of the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act will be a challenge, because sometimes you pass a law and the administration ignores it, and that's unfortunately, by experience, I've learned that that's bipartisan. I've served in Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, and both know how to ignore provisions of the law that you worked hard to get. But the support for family and medical leave is strong, and the challenge there is how you pay for it. There are many proposals. The one I like is that you have a very negligible tax like workers' compensation, where you pay about a tenth of a cent for your pay into a pool when somebody takes medical and family leave. It's paid for out of the pool like workers' compensation, not directly by the employer. In that way, if somebody takes leave and you have to hire somebody to replace them, the employer isn't paying two paychecks at the same time for one person's work. It's paid for by the outside fund, and so there are ways of getting it done, and our job is to work together, bipartisan cooperation, and get it done. I think there's a lot of support for family and medical leave when someone has a baby, and I think there are only one or two other countries in the world, and when I saw the list, I didn't recognize the name of the countries that did not have family leave when you have a child, that you could take a couple of weeks off. Most of the countries, it's a matter of months that you can take off right after the birth of a child. The United States doesn't do it yet.
Well, look, it sounds like you've got a good relationship with her, and you're working on some things that matter. And finally, we're going to get something done instead of a lot of the jumping up and down that we've gotten out of your new majority so far. Let's get to Medicaid for all, the Republicans, and your way of working with people. We understand the Republicans on your committee and the ranking member has asked you to conduct hearings on Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders' plan, as you know, some independent agency says it would cost $32 trillion if fully enacted. Is that something?
If fully enacted tomorrow afternoon, that could be right. The number I'd be interested in finding is how much, as a society, are we spending for health care today? That number would be more than Medicare for all. Medicare for all, if it were enacted, would result in us as a society paying less for health care than we are. I think people have said, well, taxes would have to go, a company would have to pay more taxes. That's right, you'd pay more taxes, but you would pay less in increases taxes than you would save by not having to cover everybody's health care. The challenge, quite frankly, is the transition. If you tried to do it overnight, you're right. All people would notice is their taxes went up. They wouldn't notice that they're not paying for health care anymore. And frankly, the easiest way to make a positive step would be having a public option as part of the options on the marketplace. If you had a public option, and that passed the House and was one or two votes short in the Senate, people would be able to select Medicare as an option, and I think that would start the process in an affordable way. And it's affordable because, frankly, CBO has scored that as a cost savings to the government. We would be paying less by providing a public option in the federal budget than we're paying today. And it is such a good policy that the criticism of at least a couple of the senators said they opposed it because it would be, quote, unfair competition. Unfair competition. That means it would provide better health care at a lower price, and that's unfair. We can't have that. Well, some people think, well, if you can do it at a lower cost and better health care, maybe that is a good idea. But their position was it is such a good idea that it's not even fair. Well, if we're both right, I think a lot of people will support the public option. And then we can see gradually maybe never get there, maybe get there, get to a Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. But I think the points you've made have pointed out you can't do it tomorrow afternoon.
Look, I'm in favor of the public option, as Senator Tim Kaine is and have been for some time, because let's get the second word emphasized, option. That means if you don't want to buy it, don't. If you want to buy it, you have the option to buy it. Conservatives
and let me
like
tell you
options.
something else. If I'm right that it is such a good idea, many people will buy the option, and you won't need to go to a single-payer plan. So many people will have will take the option because it is a better price for
Sure.
You get a better price and better product. that you won't need to go to. You wouldn't, and some have talked about eliminating private insurance. You don't need to eliminate private insurance. Give people an option. I believe that people will choose the public option because it's a lower price. You get a better product, and if people want to buy, I mean, they go do private. Pay if they want to pay more for less. Let them do it.
I mean, you get the option. I mean, and then the couple of senators who said it's unfair competition. That is like saying the United States Postal Service is unfair competition to UPS and FedEx. I mean, it's an asinine argument, and I'm in favor of the public option because it's an option. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. Who cares, right? Well, you make the decision, and conservatives should be in favor of that, giving people choices and options. Why you would be not in favor of this makes no sense to me. I'm almost out of time. I've only got a minute. Your new colleague, AOC, you know, like you've been there all these years and you're chairman of a committee and you never get to go on CNN or any of the talk shows. And she's on like every day and she's 29 years old and she's captured your party. And now she's got the new Green Deal, which is going to cost, we understand, $97 trillion. In fact, your mother's home where you have your picnic every Labor Day, that would have to go. That would have to get remodeled. That's too old. That doesn't fit any of her standards, so your mom's home would have to go. Come on. I mean, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
I think the Green New Deal is aspirational. I mean, nobody seriously thinks we can do all of that. We may never be able to do it, but I think we ought to be able to have an aspiration that we can clean up the environment for the next generation. We shouldn't. I mean, we shouldn't be in political jeopardy just because we hope that one day we can accomplish a much better environment. If we don't do something, we've already seen evidence of climate change, rising sea levels. I mean, if we don't do something, my mother's home will be underwater anyway. So let's just hope. We shouldn't get in political problems for that.
Look,
nobody is seriously suggesting that we enact the New Deal. I think we
you got presidential candidates. You've got presidential candidates in your own party, like Cory Booker yesterday, endorsing it. Come on, Congressman, you know it's crazy.
You endorse a resolution which is aspirational. No one is seriously considering the effort would be the reality would be when you have legislation actually accomplishing some of that. And I think that we're doing some of it. We've got emission standards in cars. We're trying to get emission standards at power plants. There's a lot we're trying to do to improve the atmosphere. And if we don't do something about climate change, you first have to recognize it's a problem and try to do something about it. Some of the suggestions will not be feasible, but where they're feasible, let's at least hope that we can do something.
You and I both know it's crazy. All right, here's my final question. I have to go.
Well, you're right. Nobody is suggesting that we enact a thing overnight. You're right about that.
Well, because it's crazy. Okay, so here's my final question.
It's not crazy to hope.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
Here's my final question.
We can do better.
We got to go, but here's my final question. Should I be Trump chairman of Virginia again, yes or no?
If you were chairman again, he would have a thoughtful chairman and somebody much better than the Corey Stewart that was chair for a little while 4 years ago. You'd be a good chairman.
All right, we're going to save that and send it to the White House.
Oh, no, that's not going to help you. Keep that a secret.
John Fredericks Radio Network, truck the truth across America. Congressman Scott, thanks for being with us.